Hello, good people. This is Hillbro today's studios. Today, we want to talk about the history of Africa. How white people came and took over what belongs to Africans. It started in the Berlin Conference of 1984 to 1985. So, I just want you to watch this. I just want you to watch this video. Right after watching this video, please, if you have got comments or you can send you can comment on the video on YouTube, or if you want to say something on the YouTube platform, you can contact me. We can have a discussion about it. But the thing is, we all know what happened in the Berlin conference. They took a decision to come and divide Africa amongst themselves, right? And they did so successfully. So the question is now, to undo that, what must be done to undo what they did, right? That is the biggest question. Alright, without wasting much time, please, I need fairness in this video. I need fairness, whether you are white, whether you are black. Please, just do the right thing. Say what you think is the right thing to be done, right? If you feel like the land must be given back to its rightful owners as a way of saying we are sorry for what we did, please come open and talk your mind. Or if you think no, the land must never be given back to the rightful owners, what was done, let's forget and move on. Also, come forward, let's hear your input. Or if you think the land has been developed and we think we need some compensation to be done to those who stole it and developed it, whereas they were developing it for their benefit. They built railway lines when they came here, not to transport Africans, not to bring development in transport sector for Africans, but to transport the raw materials and the gold and whatever they were doing. It was benefiting them. So I want to hear your mind. So thank you so much. Without wasting much time, let me play the video. Enjoy.
The Berlin Conference formalized the Scramble for Africa. The Scramble, a term coined by the British around 1884, was a period of time in the late 19th and early 20th centuries where several European powers explored, divided, and conquered the continent of Africa. The Berlin Conference was a series of negotiations between 13 European nations and the United States, where these major forces met to decide how they would pursue the division of unclaimed African territory. This conference spanned over 4 months, from November 15th, 1884 to February 26th, 1885. By the end of the conference, these powers decided how they would divide Africa amongst themselves, producing, other than the established boundaries between colonies, the 1885 General Act. This act declared the neutrality of the Congo River Basin, guaranteed freedom for trade and shipping for all states in the basin, forbade the slave trade, and rejected Portugal's claims to the Congo River estuary, thus making possible the founding of the independent Congo Free State by Belgium. This is important because prior to the scramble, Europe had been slow to realize the benefits of claiming African land. Until the 1870s, they were mainly claiming coastal colonies, primarily along the Mediterranean and the African Deep South. Before the conference, European diplomacy in Africa was practiced in the same manner as in the Americas, forming trade relationships with tribe leaders. Other than trading posts along its coast, Africa was largely ignored. However, this changed as a result of Belgium's King Leopold II. By the mid-19th century, Africa was seen as ripe for potential for exploration, trade, and colonization. In 1876, King Leopold II announced his plan to fund an expedition to explore the Congo, and followed through in 1879 by sending Sir Henry Morton Stanley there. In that same year, France began to build a railway located east of Dakar, the capital of current-day Senegal, in the hopes of tapping into potentially large markets in the Sahel region of Africa. They also joined Great Britain in seizing financial control over Egypt. From 1879 to 1885, Stanley was situated in the Congo as an envoy for King Leopold II, who sent Stanley with the secret agenda of creating the Congo Free State, a large Belgian commercial endeavor in the Congo. France found out Leopold's plans, though, and proceeded to organize its own colonial expansion. French naval officer Pierre de Brazza was dispatched to Central Africa when he traveled to the Congo Basin and claimed territory for France. Meanwhile, Portugal, who already had treaties in place with the Congo Empire, joined this race and quickly formed a treaty with its old ally, the United Kingdom, to block off the Congo Free State's access to the Atlantic. As a result of Stanley's chartering in the Congo Basin, the spheres of control between nations such as Britain, France, Portugal, and Belgium were more clearly outlined. In the coming years, various European powers raced to claim more land and eliminate any minor local rulers with the potential of disrupting European agendas. As France expanded its territory in Africa, such as what is now the Republic of the Congo, as well as Guinea, they inadvertently partially convinced Italy to join the Triple Alliance, an agreement between Germany, Austria-Hungary, and now Italy. In doing so, German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck's carefully laid plans for Italy were disrupted, forcing Germany to get involved into the affair. Germany joined the others in the race to claim parts of Africa, thus posing a threat to the others, especially Britain and France. As tensions rose, Leopold was able to convince Britain and France that free trade between the colonies would be in their best interests. Supported by Britain and with the initiative taken by Portugal, Otto von Bismarck organized an international conference in Berlin to work out a common policy regarding colonization, trade, and the official partitioning of Africa. Representatives from Austria-Hungary, Belgium, the United Kingdom, France, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Italy, the Netherlands, Portugal, Russia, Spain, the Ottoman Empire, and the United States all attended this conference. Although it did not start the partitioning of Africa, the Berlin Conference did result in consequences that impacted the continent as a whole, even to this day. In establishing the rules for conquest and partitioning of Africa, it legitimized the concept of Africa being a mere playground for outside forces, Its abundance of resources was essentially free for foreign powers to seize, without a moment of consideration for the native people living on the continent. Given how the main priorities of this conference were to establish methods of economic advancement for the foreign powers involved, it is clear that the welfare of natives was an afterthought. From the very start, the conference laid out its chief priorities, and I quote, "The powers are in the presence of three interests: that of the commercial and industrial nations, which a common necessity compels to the research of new outlets; that of the states, of the powers summoned to exercise over the regions of the Congo, an authority which will have burdens corresponding to their rights; and, lastly, that which some generous voices have already commended to your solitude, the interests of the native populations." Despite maintaining the position that they cared about the native populations, they resolutely refused to consider the question of sovereignty and the legitimacy of laying claim to someone else's land and resources. Bismarck even stated, I quote, in their opening remarks that delegates had not been assembled to discuss matters of sovereignty either of African states or of the European powers in Africa. In addition, their lack of respect for the native Africans was also made abundantly clear in how no Africans were included in the conference, and how the Sultan of Zanzibar was ridiculed for his attempts to be invited. One of the most significant consequences on the short-term scale was how Europeans used their claims as an excuse to exploit the continent, taking raw materials and using natives for underpaid menial labor. Infrastructural improvements were made in order to exploit raw materials, as opposed to helping the indigenous people of Africa. The principle of effective occupation that was established at the conference meant that European powers had to physically establish control over areas to claim them. The Europeans began to use force, if necessary, in their quest to gain new territories. The Congo Free State became the site of terrible crimes as Leopold II deputized forces to seize rubber, ivory, and other materials by terrorizing and brutalizing the local people. Additionally, in the First World War, countries such as France and Britain used natives in order to fill their ranks, even though the natives did not have any attachment to Europe. On a larger scale, the conference had the detrimental effect upon the infrastructure of several African countries. Despite achieving independence for the most part in the 1950s and 1960s, many African countries have continued along the destructive path established in Berlin. Former Tanzanian President Julius Nyerere declared, and I quote, "We have artificial nations carved out at the Berlin Conference in 1884, and today we are struggling to build these nations into stable units of human society. We are in danger of becoming the most balkanized continent of the world." As a result of several colonial powers imposing their own boundaries on the continent, entire groups of people, conflicting or otherwise, were separated or forced together. When these countries became independent, they ended up having ethnic conflicts, further weakening them. By the time these countries regained their independence, they had accumulated a history of conflict and potential fragmentation that could not be disregarded, eliminated, or made to operate properly. Before the conference, only 20% of Africa was under European control. Following the acceleration in colonizing caused by the organization provided by the conference, by 1914, 90% of Africa was under the thumb of various European countries. The only exceptions were Ethiopia, named at the time Abyssinia, Liberia, and the Dervish state, which is a small portion of what is now Somalia. Following the conference, Africa was divided between 13 of the powers from the conference. However, establishing political boundaries was the easy part. As a result of their decided strategy of effective occupation, they were able to capture geometric portions of African land, with boundaries that did not consider native tribes, cultures, or groups occupying the area. These boundaries separated ethnic groups and pushed opposing groups together. In order to govern the territory seized, they had to surmount a confusing amount of fluid identities, cultures, traditions, and languages. In order to handle this, the Europeans reorganized the native Africans into groups and units they could understand and easily control. Oxford University professor Terence Ranger stated that this period was marked by, I quote, systemic inventions of African traditions, ethnicity, customary law, traditional religion. Before colonialism, Africa was characterized by pluralism, flexibility, multiple identity. After it, African identities of tribe, gender, generation were all bound by the rigidities of invented tradition. A product of this reorganization is the languages spoken by different countries in Africa. Countries such as Cameroon, the Ivory Coast, Senegal, and Burkina Faso speak French due to being in the French sphere of influence. On the other hand, Uganda, South Africa, and Zimbabwe, amongst others, speak English because Britain controls those areas. Considering how the conference accelerated and formalized the actions that would end ancestral life in numerous African countries, there was not much that stayed the same amongst them. Daily life was drastically altered, with citizens being separated from their identifying groups and categorized in a Eurocentric manner with blatant disregard for the fluidity of their cultures. If you liked this video, please check out the description for those like and subscribe buttons, and we've also included some further readings down there if you're interested in the topic. Hope you have a great day. Bye.